Hey there, Chad here. This is a new series I'm starting on Pro Cycling Manager 2023. Now this series is intended to be a complete beginner's guide to Pro Cycling Manager. I picked up this game back in 2020 for the first time and really came to like it very, very quickly. My son and I were doing a lot of biking. This popped up in Steam as an option and we took a look at it and we both really enjoyed it. It's a fun little game, but if you don't know a lot about cycling, the sport of cycling is very different from most other professional sports in a lot of ways. It's both a team and an individual sport at the same time. A team is constructed in a manner where each rider has roles that it fills and tasks that it performs, usually with the end goal being making one of the riders win the race. Funding is primarily through sponsorships, and those sponsors determine what the objectives of a team are at any particular time. That might be to win a particular race or to, participate in a certain number of races in a particular region, things like this. In this episode, we will go ahead and get a cyclist set up, and I will explain some of the options you have to get started, and we'll get into the first race. So first I'm going to select single player. And then career is where you manage an entire team. What we want to do for now is Pro Cyclist. That's what I'm going to select. And this basically asks what data set you want to use. I'm going to use the default data set that comes with the game. And that'll take a moment. And then we are at the creation screen. So I'm going to pick a guy who looks nothing like me. And I'm going to name him last name first. There, that'll keep that kind of clean, and we're going to pick a country of United States. Now, believe it or not, your country selection, as I understand it, can impact some of your game choices. It'll kind of impact what teams might be interested in you. Cycling is basically driven by the sponsors, and the sponsors have objectives for teams. Some teams may have a sponsorship requirement of, I only want riders under a certain age or riders from a certain region of the world. So this can impact some of your decisions. I am not going to worry about that, at least at this point. I think once you start playing the game and you really want to get into it, you understand cycling, maybe that would make some more sense to get concerned about some of those details. All right, so I think that'll do for this. And then we're going to go on to decide what kind of rider I want. There are a few different types of riders that we can set up. And just to really quickly cover these stage races, these are races that span multiple days, where each day you'll do a different stage of the race. The Tour de France is a prime example of this. Racers in these races tend to be good at two things. They're good at time trials, because most stage races include a time trial or two segment, and then also at climbing, because a lot of those races are done in the mountains. Then climber is one who will focus primarily on climbing mountains. As we click on these, it gives a very nice description, so that might be something you might want to do and look through these. I mentioned time trial. This is a one-off race where you literally are competing against the clock. They send out a new rider every 30 seconds or minute or 2 minutes, whatever the length of the course demands. Next we have a sprinter. A sprinter is very good at kind of storing up their energy and going very hard for the last couple of 100 meters of a race. And then we have a puncher. A puncher is really good on the high effort hills, usually late in a stage race. Maybe it isn't uncommon to see a finish line at the top of a peak, and a puncher might be very good at really finishing that hill. And we'll talk about how these attributes work, because these are not intuitive in a lot of cases. So then puncher, there's Northern Classics. Northern Classics tend to be races that are run on rough terrain, specifically cobblestone is what the game calls out here. And if you've ever ridden a bike on grooved concrete or anything like that, it is a different experience. It takes a skill set to do that efficiently and to be able to maintain your speed and not wear yourself out. That's what this is kind of focusing on, is riders who would be very good at that sort of racing. In the races in the game, what you'll see are segments inside the actual individual race where there's cobblestone. You can see them on the, the map prep and things like that. And in those areas, a rider with skills in cobblestones will perform much, much better and save more energy than riders who don't have that skill. And then there's Baroudeur. I'm not actually sure I'm saying that word properly. My apologies if I'm really butchering that. But this is somebody who's generally good at flats, riding through gentle rolling hills. In the game, that's defined as plus or minus 3% grade. This is where this kind of rider will excel. So they have very strong flat abilities, and then they'll have some mountain in that. Actually, some of this is probably coming from our secondary axis. If we clear this out, we get a little bit better look. These are the things the Barodur is very good at. Okay, so for the purpose of this, I'm going to set up a targeted rider. I tend to like climbers. I like to think that's what I would be if I were a professional cyclist. I think a lot of us kind of like that. If you've ever watched like the Tour de France, you see these guys going up these 15% grades and they just chug along for an hour doing that. I mean, I can't do that in real life, but I'd like to think if that was my job, that's what I'd be good at. And then secondly, I'm going to choose stage races. And this is, to be fair, this is kind of stacking a little bit. Stage races, they tend to be good climbers as well. So I'm going to have really good mountain and medium mountain skills. You'll notice my cobblestone skill is 52. That is very, very low. Flat is only a 57. I think what we're looking at as a normal is about 62, 63 when you're starting. So you can see my acceleration will be pretty good. And again, not all these are intuitive. Why don't we go ahead and cover that right now? So we'll run through these really quickly and go into some more detail in the future, but I do want to just give you a little idea of what they do. So the flat attribute is how well you perform on grades that are -3 to +3%. Mountain, medium mountain, and hills, these all apply to grades over 3%, and they have to do with the amount of effort you're putting out at the time, which of these factors get used. We'll go into that in depth during a race at some point, but ultimately all three of these measure the same ability, just how hard you're putting out is which of these gets used. Time trial is the speed in long time trials that are 20 or more kilometers long. A prologue is the same as time trial, but it's a shorter one. It's less than 20 kilometers. Cobblestones is your speed on cobblestones and those kinds of roads. Sprint is your maximum speed at maximum power. Acceleration is your ability to change your speed or your pace. Downhill is your speed on descending terrain. The Barodur is an interesting one. It is more about the temperament of the rider. It has to do with his combative temperament and his ability to create breakaways when he's riding alone. Stamina then is the potential for long distance effort. Resistance is, this is kind of an interesting one. It's difficult to explain in just a few words, but it's the potential for intense effort. It's how much you're capable of putting out an intense effort. And then recovery is strictly, has to do with the amount of recovery that can occur between two stages of a stage event. So from one day to the next is what this is. This is not in race recovery, and that does get a little confusing at times. Let's talk about potential. This basically gives you the opportunity to set how good of a rider you can be. For our purposes, we're going to say we can be the best in the world. If you want a more challenging rider, you can certainly limit these, and that is certainly your right. And we're going to say next. And what will come up next is we get to pick a team that we're going to belong to. Okay, so there are 3 levels of teams. There's Continental, that's the lowest. Continental Pro, that's the middle. And then there's World, I think it's World Tour. We don't see one of those right now, but that would be the top level racers. I like to start in the Continental for a couple of reasons. You could do Continental Pro, and you're going to start off on a slightly better team, but you're going to be a much lower ranked rider on that team. You know, in this case, I would be the 20th rider out of 24 on this team if I were to pick it. I would much rather be, you know, the 5th best rider on a team, maybe the 2nd in stage races. And actually, what I think I'm going to do for the purposes of this playthrough, oh yeah, we're gonna pick Continental. We're gonna pick Radio Papa. This is a race team out of Portugal. I'd like to point out, for licensing purposes, a lot of these names have been altered just a little. So, hey guys, Beckman, Axon, however you say that. The real team is Hagens, Berman, Axion. It was changed for licensing. Radio Papa is what I'm calling it. It's actually Radio Popular in Portugal. And you can look through here and see where you rank if you to take the slot with that team. Again, this is a smaller team, so I'll have the opportunity to race more frequently, and I do like that, particularly early in the career. It's good to have the opportunity to, you know, improve your skills. So we're going to take Radio Papa, and we are going to sit next. And once that is done, we will pop up to our dashboard screen. When you first start a game, you will have two messages that are sent to you. One is welcome to our team. I'm going to delete that one. Now this is something that has an action on it that we have to do. Cycling is all about being prepared physically for the year, and what this is asking us is the date, today's date in the game starts on January 1st, and this is our trainer basically saying, how well did we train in preparation for the season? And we have two options. We can say, I am totally prepared, basically, so my preparation values will be up to 90%, but I'm going to have 15 of tiredness. Or I'm pretty well prepared, which is 75 to 80 in preparation, but only 5 tiredness. For this playthrough and these tutorial videos, I'm going to select the first one because this basically allows me to start at much closer to my max. It is not unusual to go ahead and start a little bit lower because the bigger races that you want to be ready for and hugely prepared for aren't until later in the year. And so in those cases, once you know where the races are that you want to do, you can go ahead and select this. You can't stay at an 85 to 90% prepared throughout the season because your tiredness will climb and climb, and eventually it eats away at that. And then you'll have to take rest and drive that number down and allow these numbers to be able to be built back up. So again, I'm going to start with I'm very prepared this season. Just so that I can get some good performances early on. I think for your first season, that's not the worst thing. There's a few races at the beginning of each year that kind of help you get the lay of the land, and it's not a bad thing to go ahead and do well in those races, earn some early points towards your skills, and get those started. Tons of data here. There are no results. It's the first of the year. Nothing has happened. We haven't set up our training, and in fact, we can't even set up our training until at least tomorrow. Now, so what we will do is we'll hit continue. As soon as I hit continue, it's going to start ticking off days, and because there are no races until the 3rd or so, a little further in there, actually, I'm sorry, the 9th, this is where we're at. So there's no races for a week. The first 7 days will absolutely fly by, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit continue and then immediately hit space. Okay, and what that'll do is stop the clock on the 3rd. This allows me to set up some training. We're going to keep this very simple right now. By the way, we have a couple of new messages. I didn't delete this message. This was the one that had the accept, where we told them how prepared we were. Then this is telling us that we have the ability to change our schedule. So the team has put together our race schedule for the first 3 months, and we can change that schedule by going to the calendar page. We weren't able to do that on the 1st. But we can do it now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the message, but we'll go to calendar and look at it real quick. This is the list of races for the first 3 months. This is the calendar for the first 3 months. We can change pages on the calendar either with the arrows or the drop down. So this is the 2nd of January, 3rd of January. This is today. Our first race is on the 9th, and it is the Cyanide Cup. Cyanide is the developer of the game. This is a fictional race. Our team has 6 riders registered for this particular race. We will be riding in it. That's what the check mark here indicates. And right now we have no points for the season. What this means, we're not able to change things on this calendar right now. As we move forward, we'll start to gain points. Various amounts of points can be used to pick races that you want to participate in or drop races that you don't want to participate in. There are other things that points are used for, like selecting teammates you want to race with you. Those really aren't impactful for what we're doing right now. If you look through here, you can see looks like we're going to be racing several times in the first 3 months. The category of a race, CYA these are the Cyanide races. These are mandatory. You have to race in these. The numbers here, 2.1, 2.pro, 1.2, these indicate the type of race and the level of the race. And if you float over them, it'll kind of show you what that means. Okay, the screen I went to here is under results and then rules. And what this shows us is the breakdown of teams. Cyanide Tour, World Tour basically. This is the top level, CWT. And then we have the Continental Pro and then the Continental. The races you have access to are based on which of these tours you're on. We're going to be in Continental at first, so we'll have access to these. And the way the rating works is basically the first number indicates whether or not it's a stage race, having a 2, or a classic, which is a single day race, which has a 1. Then the second digit, in this case, is pro, but then the 1s or the 2s indicates the level of prestige of the race. So the pro races are high prestige, or as it calls it, prestigious races. The dot 1 is an average importance, and the dot 2 is a lesser importance. Then the dot U's, those are under 23 races. And so our character, it will start at 19 years old, and so they will have access to the U races as well. This is the main dashboard. Again, I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but let's go to training real quick. There's two pieces to training that I want to set up now while I have the chance. Click the ellipsis there to take us to training. So you have the ability to set when you train how efficiently or how hard you train at any particular time. For the purposes of getting started, I highly recommend just using the trainer suggestion. This will take into account races that are coming up, which ones you're going to be participating in, and it kind of makes a plan around that. The second thing you need to do is go to weekly. Now this gets interesting. We picked, for this rider, we picked them to be a climber and a stage race rider. Those areas of focus are represented here. The climber is the 50% and the 20% is the stage racer. So in the game we have levels. We start at level 1, and as we level, we are able to increase in a domain. Now a domain is an area of focus that is climbing or stage racing or sprinting, the broad categories that we talked about before. So I think this is pretty cool. New this year in the game, instead of just changing one of those attributes when you level up and you decide you want to improve something, you actually have to plan ahead, and during your training you have to train in those categorical areas or those domains, and you have to train enough in that domain in order to be able to increase those points. So what this means is when points become available, you can't just decide to appoint them in any particular place at all. You have to have trained in the area enough to be able to increase that domain. I think that's a really interesting way to handle leveling up. You know, it allows you to prevent someone from focusing on a skill that they've never used or never trained in. A minimum of 25% is required for progression, and a minimum of 75% is required for evolution of potential. So right now my rider has a set cap on how good he can be in any one of these categories. I don't know what that cap is, but at some point I will reach that cap and I won't be able to improve these anymore unless I do this evolution of potential. When you level, two things happen. You get a skill point that you can spend in the skill tree, and we'll look at that in just a moment. And then you have the opportunity to either improve one of these domains or increase the potential for one of the domains. Right now, the only domain I can improve in is climber because it's the only one above 25%. In order to be able to gain access to other things, what I have to do, drag these and drop them down here, and what it will do, you'll notice this is now 55% because I'm doing one effort of that. I'm going to go ahead and do two efforts of that, and it'll go up a little bit more, but not too much. And I'm going to also do my stage racing, get it at least 25%. And then maybe I want to work on flats. That would be this one. Or maybe I want to work on sprinting. That actually isn't the worst thing to work on. Bring sprinting down here. Actually, you right click to remove these. Actually, I'm gonna bring down cobblestone. I probably want to get a little decent at cobblestone. So after this first week of training and using these spots, my climber will be at 58%. My stage racing will be at 25. My cobble will be at 5. So when I level up, I'll have the opportunity to improve one of these groupings. If I go to the following week, you'll notice these drop back off a little bit. In fact, this one went to 0. It was at 5, and now it's at 0. But if I do this again, it's going to go up to 10. So it builds on what you've already done, is what I want to show there. So here from 52, I'm going to go up to 63. From 20, this is probably like 28. Oh, 30. Goes all the way up to 30. And then we'll drop this one in here again, and that'll be at 66. So in this week, if I have the ability to improve a skill group, I would be able to do one of these too still. But I still won't be at 75% where I can say I want to increase my cap. I won't be able to do that yet. In fact, in order to get to that, I think I have to do this like, yeah, see, even one more week of just doing that, although I only have 2 slots that week because there's probably a race that week that I'm in or something else is going on. But basically my trainer says I can only do 2 of these free spots. I have to go out yet another week. Before that'll be over 75%. At this point, if I were to level, I would be able to increase the cap or the evolution of potential for this group. You'll notice also that these start to get worse. This one didn't go up from 5. It was at 10 last time we used it. This one dropped as well. So these will adjust back to a normal if you allow them to atrophy. This is what keeps you driving on specific course and keeps you from, winning a race as a climber and then all of a sudden focusing all of your skill points on sprinting, which had nothing to do with what got you there. I like this technique. This is a kind of a neat game mechanic, and I believe this is completely new to this year's edition of this game. Okay, and why don't we take to close out this episode, let's take a quick look at skills. We did look at rider data real quick, and that just shows us some of our information. Incidentally, as we progress, we'll get to see where we finished in races, and it keeps a calendar of that. Teams we signed with, things like that. I really enjoy that kind of stuff myself. This is our basic one, though. As you can see, I'm good in the mountains. Decent in the medium mountains and the hills, and I'm suffering quite a bit on cobblestones. That might be something I want to build back up. Let's look at skills real quick. This is the skill tree. There's not a whole lot to it. Each of these have 3 settings in them, and you have to start at the left and move right. Some of them feels like you could be spending a skill point on something that isn't tremendously useful. Like if you look down here, by having more contacts of interest, I have a greater impact on the agent's work in the spring. So when the spring comes along, we will have our agent try to find a better contract for us potentially, maybe with a better team or maybe a better contract with our current team. That's all completely fine. This improves that ability, and again, there's 3 levels of that. So we initially would only have 1 contact, but eventually we can have 2, 3, or even 4 contacts. That gives our agent more ability to look into multiple teams for us, for instance. Some of the stuff has to do with learning about other riders. Some of it has to do with physical abilities you gain during a race. I actually like the technique. This allows you to slide through the peloton a lot more easily. When you have that ability, you can kind of slide through folks pretty easily. You get around them very quickly, and you're not wasting a lot of energy in trying to get around them. The other one that's really popular, in fact, what I see most people doing very regularly, is this attentiveness. It increases your XP each month. So at the end of each month, we get just a set of XP based on probably our skill level, things like that. I think it starts at 50 points a month. If I use this, it'll go up by 10%. The second time I do it, 20%, and then ultimately 30%. Fitness peak, this increases the targets that you have available to you. So it basically allows you to be more physically fit during the season. Sometimes you're going to have race day conditions that are negative. We'll see that during a race. We'll point that out. This allows you to clear some of those periodically. Kind of a neat skill as well. Better manage your tiredness. This is very important. Again, tiredness is what will impact your overall fitness during the year. So some really great things in the skill tree. Allows you to take your rider in different directions. I'm probably going to focus on attentiveness, 1 or 2 points in technique, and then fitness peak initially, and probably go from there after a few levels. I think that kind of shows us the basics of getting around. Again, this screen you're not going to have a whole lot of interaction with initially. After you've played the game a little more, this stuff will start to make sense, and then you can really start to enjoy yourself and play with the individual features inside of this. But for now, the important things, your messages, maintaining that your training has spots filled here. You'll see some information about your team and various latest results. Hope you'll stick around for the next episode where we're actually going to start the first race. That'll be the first of the 3 Cyanide races. Usually can do fairly well in that race, but I don't expect that I'll win it. Maybe can get a top 10 if things go my way, depending on the course that's selected. But other than that, I hope you'll stick around and continue to watch the series. Let me know what you think. If this is something you want to see more of, that's great. I like doing tutorial style videos. You probably know that from some of my other stuff. I also wouldn't be averse to doing an actual season. So as usual, thank you for your time, and until next time, fair travels.